but what was the salary? 너무 들어가고.
It was yeah.
어?
More.
뭘? 네, 안녕하세요. 대한민국장사꾼입니다. 오늘 온 게스트는 좀 이력이 화려합니다. 이분이 왜 저희 게스트로 왔는지 약간 이해가 안 갈 정도인데, 일단 제가 브리플리하게 설명을 하면 경력이 일단 이분이 왜 왔지 여기? 그러니까 말 그대로 이제 미드 속 뭉치나.
Yeah, so my name is Eugene. Three main countries that I grew up in. So I was born in the Soviet Union, grew up in Israel, but my family moved to the US when I was in 4th grade. So in the US is where I spent most of my life. I did my undergrad at NYU, studied finance and statistics. So I went into finance right after school. I worked for 5 years in finance at Ernst & Young, at Goldman Sachs. It was definitely an interesting experience, but after 5 years in finance, I decided to move into different kind of firms. So I moved into startups and scale-ups. So spent a couple of years doing that, and then from there, I decided to get my MBA at INSEAD. It's an intensive program where I studied both in France and Singapore, traveled all over the world, met really interesting people. And after my MBA at INSEAD, I ended up over here in Korea.
So, based on your background, you went through so many startup company in different country. Which country you have been?
Yeah, so most of my work experience has been in the US, specifically New York. But in New York, I got to work both in the corporate as well as in startup and scale-ups. And I worked a little bit in a startup in Los Angeles as well. So that was the majority of my experience. I also did work outside of that, worked a little bit in China. So when I was doing my undergrad, I studied abroad in Shanghai. So I studied there, but then I also wanted to get some Asia experience at the time. So I worked in a semiconductor company in Shanghai.
Then China is your first Asian country you have been.
Yes.
Then you just came here just 5 months ago, and then have you ever seen any a Korean startup company here?
So yeah, came here 5 months ago. My girlfriend and I, we've been using Coupang a good amount.
Do you know Coupang is not a Korean company?
Coupang is not a Korean company.
Basically, because that company got a fund from Japan.
Okay, yeah, SoftBank.
SoftBank.
Yes. But it's still a very interesting model, right? Because in our minds in the US, we're very used to Amazon, right? Especially now during the pandemic, Amazon forefront in terms of the ordering.
Yeah, except for Coupang, what about the other company?
Well, we use Kakao, right? So Kakao Maps, right? Obviously. Also, it was, even walking over here, my girlfriend and I, we commented on how many Lotte stores there were, right? Lotte everything, Lotte Mart, Lotte Apartments, there's the Lotte restaurants as well. So those kind of companies are very interesting, how there's some chaebols, but then in between the chaebols, you also do have some independent companies that come in.
So next question is MBA. You finish your MBA, right? All the business want to get into MBA. So you finish in INSEAD.
Yes.
INSEAD. Actually, that sounds is not familiar with us. So could you tell us what is it in detail?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
INSEAD or MBA?
Maybe both. You can
Yeah.
compare both.
Sure. So MBA, right, Masters in Business Administration. It's basically a master's for people that want to pursue business. In the US, it is a very familiar concept. People usually do it for a couple different reasons. They either want to get to a higher role in their current company or in the same industry, or they want to relocate geographies, right? Or they want to change industries. Right, so for example, somebody that maybe comes from a non-traditional background like acting or cooking, not necessarily business oriented, but wants to get into finance or into consulting, right? It gives you, as we were saying before, the networks, right? It gives you the education, the business education, and it just exposes you to those opportunities because there's, especially at the top schools, there are a lot of companies that come in with certain programs. So that's a very established model in the US.
맞아요.
Even for people like myself, we have like we have business undergrad, but to get maybe to the higher level, still, even though you're taking some of the same courses you took in the undergrad, it makes sense to get an MBA. So for me, I was at a certain point in my career, about 8 years in, that I thought that I needed a little more direction, right? And the direction could come from a couple different things. It's exposure to new people, and they have 2 main campuses, one in France and one in Singapore. Exactly. So it's a very much, as opposed to the US, it's a very much an international perspective. So very diverse, right? Not only professional exposure, but also personal exposure, their personal experiences, and also just the way that you interact with people, right?
그래가지고 많은 이제 외국인들이 이제 막 모이는 거야. 그래서 전통적인 MBA 학교를 가면 이제 뭔가 이제 학벌 같은 거를 약간 따지는 것 같긴 해요. 근데 이제 인시아드는 그냥 다국적에서 이제 다 오는 거지. 그런 장점이 있는 것 같아. 그렇게 이제 세대가 바뀌는 것 같고, 이분도 이제 그쪽에 이제 트렌드가 맞다 해서 이제 그쪽으로 간 것 같아요. One of your special career is like you work in Goldman Sachs. So you also work in Ernst & Young. 이게 비즈니스맨으로 굉장한데 I know that company is a very great company in global, but what was your salary? 진짜 최초 공헌면 이제 골드만삭스 연봉, 실질적인 연봉. I know that you didn't get into that company because of money.
Yeah. So yeah, again, that wasn't the highest salary that I've made in my career. It was 6 figures. Yeah.
Huh? What does it mean?
More than 100,000.
100,000?
More than
$100,000.
More.
Between 100,000 and 200.
More.
More?
Okay. I mean, definitely money is important, right? And it's, you need money to survive. But for me, something that I've learned over the course of my career is it's not always about the money, right? Like maybe you take the highest salary that you can get, but the money doesn't always correspond to the project, right? Like sometimes you can get better experience if you take less money. You can be more fulfilled, right? And happier overall. So that's, I wouldn't say that always chasing the money, always, you have to think about it long term as well, right? I think that's very relevant.
This is out of like some working questions. So what are you interested in outside of work? 이게 또 대단해.
Sure. So for me, I grew up playing a lot of sports. I grew up playing tennis, I grew up playing soccer or football. I grew up in a very musical household as well, but I was always very active and running around. And I actually took this to next level when I was finishing my undergrad. I started doing races. So I started doing half marathons and marathons. And I actually also completed an Ironman as well, so that's a triathlon, right? And this was running, biking, swimming, all of that. So I completed it. It was a very, very happy moment for me, and very happy for the support that I got. Since then, perfect. Yeah, so since then, I mean, my knees are not the best, unfortunately. I have some injuries, so I do definitely less, but I still really like nowadays to go running, to go biking, and do some more of this endurance sports.
So this is like a little bit like a funny question though. Like,
Sure.
there's a movie off of the Wall Street.
My name is Jordan Belfort. The year I turned 26, I made $49 million, which...
What do you think about it? Because Koreans watch that movie a lot, and they think that Wall Street, all the Wall Street working guys are doing bad things like that. So.
Yeah, so I mean, the story is based, right, Jordan Belfort, and what was that, the 70s, 80s, right? So it's definitely not how Wall Street is these days. Whether it's an accurate representation of how it was in the past, I wasn't there, But I do think that it's really changed, that the industry is cleaning up, it's becoming more equal opportunity, not just for one certain profile, and not as dangerous personally, because it is definitely a very crazy lifestyle. And I think that's with social media, with all these perspectives being shared, the industry is shifting.
Oh, because not all people do some joke things. No.
No. I mean, especially nowadays again,
Okay.
because a lot of these firms, what they care about is their reputation.
오케이. 그러니까 영화랑은 좀 많이 다르다. 옛날 그거고. 약간 픽션이 좀 많이 들어가 있다.
Yeah.
What do you do like in Korea for fun?
Okay, so I've been in Korea since March of 2020, end of March. So Corona times, so activities are a little bit limited, but I think Korea is a very interesting place. Very warm people, very friendly. Even if at times there is language divide, people try to understand each other and try to help each other. That is very interesting for me, how Koreans are. So I have adopted that mentality. I have joined an organization called Teach North Korean Refugees, TNKR. So it helps empower North Korean refugees by teaching them English. So have a couple of students through that we do frequent English lessons. And I think it's a really great organization. Top of that, really love hiking over here. I think there's some really beautiful nature. My girlfriend and I, we love to explore different kind of food over here. She is pescatarian, so she doesn't eat fish, and I don't eat pork. But still, there's a good amount of variety. We went to Busan last weekend, delicious seafood. So I think, there's definitely a lot to do in Korea.
For fun is traveling and eating
Yes.
and teaching North Koreans English. 새터민들을 위해서 봉사활동. 여기까지 이제 미드 속에 나올 법한 이제 주인공을 인터뷰했습니다. Thank you for coming here. And
Thank you. Yeah, really nice talking to you. Really enjoyed it.
Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, definitely. Love to.
여기까지 이제 인터뷰를 마치고 이제 다음 영상이 궁금하신 분은 밑에 다른 영상을 클릭해 주시기 바랍니다. 구독과 좋아요 잊지 마시고. 바이.